I will introduce Chris. We've only talked briefly up to now, but he's a world-class negotiator and wrote the book. You can see it right there behind him, Never Split the Difference, which is in the internet marketing and sales world, it's like one of the Bibles. That and Influence by Robert, however you say his last name. Yeah, yeah. So super happy to have you here. Now, what you do, right, is negotiation. And I think one of the things Dan does with his clients who, as they're scaling their business, is he builds a thing called a plus minus list, which is, hey, look, here's all the things that you want to add to your business or change potentially. I'm going to stop my video to save some bandwidth here. And here's all the things that if there were an economic downturn of sorts, you might get rid of, right? The cool thing about the plus minus list is, hey, when there's a black swan event or when there's an economic downturn, it is a great opportunity to take that list of things you've been looking for, whether it be new office space, new employees, vendor contracts. This is the best time to negotiate them. And going through Never Split the Difference, what surprises me, what may be counterintuitive to a lot of people, is the level of empathy that you operate with. Like, your method is very
right, tactical empathy.
And so in times like this, what would be really useful to both me and our clients here is a lot of uncertainty. It's really hard to stay clear-headed. How do we negotiate in times like this? I mean, things are on a discount, right? How do we go about addressing these things and negotiating, whether it be new office space, new lease with employees that otherwise may have been priced out of our range, but now they don't.
Yeah, well, so a couple different questions. Let's start with, how do we stay clear-headed first? The easiest hack to keeping a clear head is to be just genuinely curious. When you're in a curious state of mind, you take in more information, you see patterns more quickly. It's closer to the flow state, which is your highest level of mental and physical performance. You can't be in a bad mood when you're saying emotions. You got to draw a clear distinction between negative and positive emotions. Negative emotions make you dumber. Positive emotions make you smarter. Period. There's no such thing as neutral emotions, so you either lean negative or you lean positive. Now, we're wired to lean negative. Our survival wiring, which we've inherited just because we're human beings, is largely negative. So your natural survival state actually works against you. Whatever your success mode is, unless you're naturally in a positive state of mind, your batting average is not as high as it could be. How do you hack it quickly? Just be genuinely curious. That's one great way to put yourself in a clearer state of mind. I was just having a conversation with my son, Brandon, who's the president of my company and a phenomenal negotiator in his own right. And he said, to paraphrase what he was saying, expect a bad conversation and then prepare a response for a bad reaction. You know, most people expect a bad response. They don't prepare a response for that. You know, what's your positive mood what's your positive move if the other side initially reacts very negatively? Your positive move or your coping move is going to be empathy. This gets us to the application of empathy, or tactical empathy. Empathy precedes assertion. To negotiate effectively, you have to be assertive. Because if you're not, you're hoping that the other side guesses what you want. If you don't tell them what you want, if you don't convey the information of what your needs and wants are at some point in time, you're relying on them to be a mind reader, which most people do, and is actually, when you put it like that, is kind of dumb. So you have to be assertive. The problem with being assertive is if empathy doesn't precede it, then you come off as a jerk. You come off as a demanding a-hole, which then also runs counter against your goal. I mean, you're not negotiating because you want to be perceived as a jerk because it's going to work against you. So how do you make your assertion more effective? Empathy, demonstrating that you understand the other side's predicament. Not that you agree with it, not that you think it's accurate, not that you think it's fair. You understand it, and the only way to demonstrate you understand it is to articulate it. Now let's get into one more loop here. Let's loop back to the fact that human beings are wired to be negative. Your empathy has to be grounded in your understanding of their negative perspectives on the situation and you, to deactivate them and diffuse them as quickly as possible. And that's how you get where you want. It's kind of that simple.
That's brilliant. I love the hopeless curiosity. I think that's naturally entrepreneurs. Most people on here are business owners, entrepreneurs spend a lot of time in that state of being hopelessly curious.
Cool, it's
Dan.
a great state to be in. I mean, I think entrepreneurs are probably more likely to have rewired themselves into that state of mind. Like, the whole phrase, an entrepreneur is building the airplane while it's hurtling toward the ground. And to be able to do that, I mean, that's highly optimistic. I'm optimistic that I can get this done. And that's a mind frame that makes you a better negotiator.
How often, I think you kind of alluded to this or mentioned this in the empathy precedes assertion. How often do you see these crucial conversations or these negotiations fail because one or both parties is expecting the other to just be a mind reader?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that negotiations expecting the other side to be a mind reader probably about 2/3 of the time. The world splits pretty much evenly into three types. Fight, flight, make friends. These are the cavemen that survived. Whoever you are in listening to this, you are naturally wired to either fight, flight, or make friends when it comes to conflict. The caveman that couldn't decide what to do, the indecisive caveman got eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. It doesn't have any descendants. So the fight, those of you that are wired naturally to be fighters, the asserters. I'm a natural born assertive. You're going to know where I'm coming from because that's the first thing I'm going to tell you. I'm always going to be assertive at what I want. The other two types, the relationship-oriented, make friends, or the flight-oriented, which is highly analytical, sees conflict as completely counterproductive. They kind of rely upon you to read their minds. So 2 out of 3 people that you encounter are going to rely on you to read your mind if you don't find a way to draw it out.
Well, the thing that comes to mind, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind to me often that I see both with my staff in terms of just there's somewhat a negotiation that happens with clients in terms of deadlines and what's the final deliverable going to look like, and then there's kind of the negotiations around price and things like that is kind of wrangling with the voice that's in their head, or I kind of think about it as negotiating with themselves. And I know, Chris, you talk about that in your book pretty early on, and just curious your thoughts around how to quiet that voice and make sure you're not negotiating with yourself.
Yeah, well, again, our hack is to be genuinely curious about where the other side's coming from. The smart negotiators believe that negotiation is an information gathering process. The commodity that they're really after is information. The B players believe that you gather your information and then you negotiate. You get fully prepared for the negotiation so you don't get caught off guard. The whole thing is the name of the Black Swan group is there's some information you can only get at the table. What does this have to do with negotiating with yourself? Well, if you negotiate with yourself, you've gathered the information in advance and you've begun to defeat yourself along the way. Like, I can't ask that, that's a non-starter. You're out of the genuinely curious mindset then. Like, let me toss this out and see what happens. I want to know what their reaction is. If I find out it's a non-starter, I go from wondering to knowing, which automatically made me smarter. So if you look at the negotiation as an information gathering process, then the voice in your head is only saying to you, hey, let's go find out. Let's be curious. You know, I'm a smart guy, so there's a pretty good chance I'm right. But, you know, whatever the chance is that this is better than I imagined is still there. Let me go out there and find out if I can make this better. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. It did. Another, and this is somewhat unrelated, but I think it was on the Dax Shepard podcast that you're on, if I am remembering correctly, and you were sharing the story about I think you were checking into a hotel, if I'm getting the story correct, and the way that you to your advantage to a degree, and getting I don't remember the story, but it somewhat went that you were trying to get, I think, a room upgrade and check in early, and that giving the hotel worker kind of the chance to say no, because there's and I might be capturing this incorrectly, but creating a sense of safety and the power of them saying no. And I was wondering if you might, maybe not necessarily go over that story per se, but speak a bit about the importance of no rather than always trying to get yes.
Yeah, well, you know, let's. There's a lot there. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. So let's first focus down on this whole no yes thing. Yes is a bad response to get. You know, there's the commitment yes, the confirmation yes, and the counter. Driving for a yes, and since people just roll over so quickly, you know, they want to declare victory and go home. They're going to spill their guts. They're going to provide a tremendous amount of information when they've heard yes. You know, there are really a lot of really shrewd people out there that give us a counter for yes, and then we spill our guts, give them all our value, and then they turn around and they walk away. I mean, a phrase before, you know, we realized inside that there were these three kind of yeses. I used to ask business people all the time, did you ever hear yes only to find out later it was a no? And almost everybody goes like, oh God, I'm sick of the number of times that happened to me. Well, that's because you're a yes addict. You're a yes junkie. The first deadly sin of negotiation is to lust for yes. You know, lust is a sin, and you lust for yes, because I mean, you will roll over, you will provide value, you will give in just to protect that all-seeing, all-knowing, all-satisfying yes. The flip side of that is, somebody tries to get you to say yes, your guard goes up. If I say, have you got a few minutes to talk? Your initial reaction is like, where's this going? How long is this going to take? What's this guy trying? Where's the hook? It's always, where's the hook? And the reason why that's everybody's reaction is because we've been hooked on yes someplace in the past. Sometime when we were naive, somebody said to us, hey, would you like to make more money? And we went, well, yeah. And they said, would you like to have more free time? And we said, yeah. And he said, well, would you like to get a discount on everything you buy? And I said, yeah. They said, here, buy this coupon book. It's only $25, but it gives you $25,000 in discounts for use with merchants all over the metropolitan area. And I bought that stupid book, and I still got that stupid book at my desk, and I still can't figure out how to make any of those coupons work. So I got hustled. I was flim-flammed. I was bamboozled. You know, everybody's been hustled with this yes commitment nonsense, this yes momentum, this momentum selling crap. And we've been hustled with it enough times that at some point in time, as soon as somebody tries to get us to say yes, now our guard goes up instantly. Have you got a few minutes to talk? Would this work for you? Does it sound like you would like it? Do you agree? All those cause people's guards to go up initially because we're all wondering where the hook is. So the stupid thing is, if you just flip those yes questions to no questions, and instead of saying, you know, could I have a free upgrade to a suite, you know, at the end of my presentation with a hotel person, because it's a 3-step process, but the last thing I'm going to say is that it's a ridiculous idea for me to ask for if you have any free upgrades to suites available. Now, the chances are that I got a suite that's going to go empty that night is really high. the best way for me to find out is to ask this guy in a way where he could say no, but he doesn't feel any commitment in responding to me. Because when you say no, you feel no commitment. You don't feel like you've walked yourself into a trap. So you comfortably say no to nearly any question out there because you don't feel like it obligates you to anything. You don't feel like the guy doesn't feel like if he said no to that he has to give me the sweet. He could still hold that sweet back and not give it to me. So yeah, the no warranted question is insanely powerful. A tremendous amount. Which is both wonderful and sad at the same time, because it's wonderful that they made an immediate impact on their negotiations. It's sad because that is not even the tip of the iceberg of what we teach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, listening to you talk, I think about something that we preach a lot to our group, which is this whole idea of inversion. What if we just did somewhat as a thought experiment, but what if we just did the opposite of what everyone else is doing? What would that look like as a starting point? And so much of what I'm hearing from you is almost often doing the opposite. Everyone's trying to get yes right away. And rather than being curious, everyone is just trying to get the close immediately without actually understanding the problem, or they're negotiating with themselves and they're trying to just like get rid of that anxiety right away by putting something out there that isn't necessarily what they want. I don't necessarily have a question built into that, but I was just, as I was listening to you.
No, and if you took another thought, if you don't mind that I add the thought, and I wish I could tell you, this is not my phrase. I wish I could tell you the person that said this. But I read recently a phenomenal woman negotiator said, don't come in with a negotiation strategy, come in with an understanding strategy.
Do you think, again, listening to you talk here, you talked about being flim-flammed and bamboozled, and from my perspective, and I think maybe you could speak on this, there's a lot of people that mean really well. We work with a lot of service providers. They're brilliant at what they do. They have no intention of flim-flamming or bamboozling, but what may be missing is that empathetic understanding that you may mean well, but you're saying the same thing as the person that bamboozled them. Right. So you might have to approach it differently. So for people that have a hard time, they mean well, they know they're not going to bait and switch anybody, and they're frustrated because the reaction is like, oh, where's the hook, right? Even if there isn't one. So what is your advice to people that come from that place where they feel like they're really coming from a place of meaning well, and it's really frustrating because they're meeting this resistance from people that are carrying baggage, because we're all carrying baggage from somebody that screwed us somewhere, right?
Right.
So what do you say to somebody that has a great product, means well, and is running into that friction, which is, the baggage that the other person is carrying from prior experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I ask them to consider is, what happens when you try to hug a battered child? Now, you're a good person, and you know that hugs are actually physically, there's scientific data out there that tells us that hugs are actually good for our health. Good, genuine, physical, warm embraces, contact from other people, actually physically good for us. So what happens if you try to administer something that's actually good, a hug, to a battered child? When you raise your arms, that battered child is still going to duck. And it doesn't matter how well-intentioned and how sincere and how decent you are, it's still a battered child on the other side, and they are going to duck. You didn't make them the battered child. You're well-intentioned, but a situation drives strategy. Situation is raising battered children. Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you. What's the best, let's say we want to practice, and I'm kind of peeking at some of the questions coming in. We want to practice empathy. We want to practice understanding situations like this. How do we develop that muscle to recognize that, okay, you know what, I don't know potentially this child's background or history. What is the appropriate way to address this? How, you know, I want to hug them because I have good intentions. How do we develop the muscle to be aware of these things, to develop this empathy?
Yeah, great question. And I like the analogy of a muscle, particularly because, you know, like any other physical attribute that requires repetition, first of all, it requires repetition to develop it, and secondly, it requires effort to maintain it. I mean, the situation everybody's facing in terms of negotiation is, regardless of what your negotiation ability is, but especially if you take the time to get better, you're faced with one of three things tomorrow. And these three things are unavoidable. You're either going to be the same, you're going to be worse, or you're going to be better. There's no way around it. It's a law of gravity, if you will. You know, it's not me saying this. It's the law of performance skill. 2 out of 3 of those things require effort. Just to stay the same requires effort. So small stakes practice for high stakes results. Start practicing with people in your world. I mean, there's probably far more negotiations going on a daily basis than you're conscious of anyway. But everybody that you interact with, you're collaborating with, you're exchanging information with them, maybe just looking to have a pleasant conversation. Take a swag. What's a swag? A scientific wild ass guess on their emotional state when you see them. Instead of asking somebody how they are, instead of asking your Lyft driver how you are, how he is, how she is, the Starbucks clerk, the person you woke up next to, you know, take a look at them, do a cold read, take a guess on how they are. Wow, looks like you're doing pretty good today. Looks like it's probably been a long day. You look like you're in a good mood. You look like something's on your mind. Seems like you're distracted. You know, these are all observations, assessments in the moment. The great thing is the message that it conveys to the other person is that you're actually seeing them as a person. You're actually taking the time to look at them. It's ridiculously gratifying on the other seen and heard when everybody says, hey, how are you? Let's get to where we want to go. Or, how are you today? I want my cup of coffee. Or, how are you today? You know, take my order. You know, how are you today is a great throwaway when we want to get to what we want to do or what we want. You know, take a cold read, take a wild guess. There's a tremendous amount of data that they're giving you before you say a word. Your guess is probably going to be pretty accurate. And the mere fact that you're making a legitimate attempt is going to want them to guide you in. Small stakes practice for high stakes results. You're not going to be able to make the read on the situation in an important negotiation if you haven't been practicing with your Lyft driver, your Starbucks clerk. You know, when we finally get back into the airports with the airline ticket personnel. I mean, I love them. I mean, they're great exercise. You're standing in line, you're watching their interactions. You got a pretty good idea what their mindset is before they get there. One of my favorites was I'm walking into LAX and I see this woman that is stressed. And she's one of these airline ticket people that is purposely avoiding your eyes so she doesn't have to wait on you. She is just worn out by the day. I'm supposed to be the next guy, but she ain't looking my way because as soon as we make eye contact, she's got to go to work. So she finally looks over at me and I walk up and I go, tough day? And she just kind of goes, no, how can I help you? And snapped herself out of it. That was probably the best that she felt that day. And all I did was take a wild guess on how things were going, and it made a big difference in her day. And I got to practice it.
Man, that's great. So you're always working the muscle, huh?
Yeah, well, and if I'm not, and occasionally I'll go for a few days when I'm not, then I'll get into a negotiation and I will underperform. And I will have only me to blame because I haven't been working on it. And that's why, you know, since I travel so much, when we're not sequestered, I take a run at every hotel clerk. Because the other funny thing, too, is I'm in a hotel the other day, one of the last hotels I checked into, and they were out of suites. But the guy was so wanting to help me based on my response that he knocked himself out. And finally he said, hey, look, I got a relationship with the guy who runs a restaurant next door. Are you hungry? I'm like, well, I was thinking about getting something to eat. And the guy takes out his business card and he says, here. And he writes 20% off of his business card. And I'm like, yeah, right. I could give out one of these coupons anytime too. I'm like, all right, I'll try it. I go to the restaurant next door. I get some food. I tell the waitress, I said, hey, I got this 20% off. And she looks at that. She goes, I never saw that before. Let me check with my manager. And sure enough, the manager recognized the business card and he comes back. She goes, you know what? You got 20% off. So yeah, you got to exercise the muscle and you never know when you're going to get something good out of it.
It's brilliant. Brilliant. So you mentioned when we're no longer sequestered, so we're all kind of, you know, sheltered in place. This is the question I really want to get to before we get to Q&A. Is I'm curious a little bit about how your world has changed, how you're continuing to practice this while we're sheltered in place, and some of your maybe your most successful, highest profile clients. Don't need to know names, but what is changing for them, and how are you kind of guiding them through this kind of unprecedented COVID-19 lockdown, quarantine stuff?
Yeah, well, a little bit of what you mentioned earlier is whether we like it or not, everybody's negotiating everything right now. I mean, we've gone out of an initial crisis mode when it was principally panic, scared, fear-driven calls being put out, like, I can't pay, I can't do this, I got no, you know, people were like massively panicked a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And probably 8 or 9 out of 10 calls that people got were just pure panic, I can't pay calls, which is crisis intervention. And our stuff is tailor-made for that. Now we're starting to shift in, you know, everybody else is caught on, like this is the time to renegotiate. And fully half the calls are getting now are like, hey, let's renegotiate. Based on the economic circumstances, whether you like it or not, we're gonna renegotiate. And that's what we're pivoting into. And I don't expect that to go away for some time. Probably it's not going to go away for the next 18 months because, you know, the economic impact, the shockwaves are yet to be felt. And, you know, we are looking at a black swan event induced recession, at least as the shockwaves reverberate to the economy and this earthquake finishes out and the economy resets itself. So we're constantly advising our clients. We're doing virtual one-on-one coaching sessions. I'm doing one-on-team coaching sessions. I coached a company a week and a half ago. They had an event that was, they had to switch from an in-person to a virtual event. They had $1.5 million on the line. All their sponsors wanted out. To date, they've saved 80% of the first mil. They've got about $500,000 still in play. They haven't given a single refund. They've given some discounts, but no refunds. And a number of their people were satisfied with how they made the pivot. They had a new value proposition. Nobody's going to hear your value proposition when they're in a panic mode. So again, you got to come in with crisis intervention skills to get them out of the panic mode so they can hear the value proposition. The crazy thing about this company, Technology Marketing Toolkit, because they just did on their own, spontaneously, they did a testimonial video that we're going to put up on our YouTube. They thought that they were going to lose all their attendees. They adjusted their enrollment offering, and now they're having 3 times as many people at the virtual event as they were going to have at the in-person event. And so we helped them navigate all that. And the people that are looking to come up, live in a better world now than they were before this happened, are the ones that are calling us now, and we're giving online training to, and they're working magic.
And folks are calling and they're in crisis mode, and as you mentioned, the crisis management. Are there any kind of initial quick tips that you could share of how you help them triage those situations?
Yeah,
well, go back to. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. Finish your question.
Does it go back to the curiosity?
Well, the curiosity and what's a predictable aspect? I mean, somebody's going to call you in some level of panic to start out with now. Now, empathy is demonstrating an understanding of another person's situation or how they feel. Like if you got to ask somebody how they are today, I'm sorry, this is going to sound harsh, but you're a bozo. Ain't nobody good. Everybody is under pressure. So if you could call me on the phone and I could go, Dan, how are you today? And your thought is, do you not know that there's a crisis? Are you unaware that the economy is shut down? But if you call me on the phone, I go, Dan, it probably sucks over there today. You're probably isolated at home. You're probably tired of looking at the walls. You got to be tired of people calling you with their hair on fire, and you got to be wondering how long this thing is going to last. And your reaction to that is going to be like, Chris is paying attention to what's going on in the world. Chris is not a bozo, at least not yet. And that's a completely different conversation. So we start our conversations out with, hey man, you got to be dealing with some crazy stuff today. You got to be tired of being at home. Now the flip side is somebody might call us on the phone and say, how are you today? And when somebody calls and asks me how I'm doing today, my response to that is like, sounds like you're dealing with a lot of stuff today. And they'll be like, yeah, man. Because people want to know that you can dial into them quickly.
Thank you.
Yep. Again, I'll just remind everybody, if you don't drop your questions in the Q&A, I may not get to them. So I'm cool, Chris, if you're ready to dive into some of these questions. We've got some good ones here.
Yeah, man, let's go for it.
Awesome. First one, how can I find opportunities to practice negotiation so that when it comes time for an important one, I've had some experience under my belt?
Yeah, I mean, all right, so your in-person interactions today are probably limited to the grocery store checkout person. But whoever you call on the phone, anybody that you have a conversation with today at all, is an opportunity to start demonstrating a little understanding, to start applying a little tactical empathy just right off the bat. Unless you spoke to no one today at all, on the phone in any way, shape, or form, then you didn't have a chance to practice these skills. But small stakes practice for high stakes results. Take a shot at whoever you're talking to at all today and take a scientific wild ass guess as to how they're doing. And then let them lead the dance from that point on and interact with them in a way that they're probably really going to appreciate. That's how you get your small stakes practice in. The grocery store clerk, if they got a mask on, take a look at them and say, hey, it looks like you're taking some serious precautions today. It looks like you're taking your job pretty seriously. It looks like that despite everything else, you came to work today because you feel an obligation to the people that you work for, the people that you serve. Take a wild guess at what's going through their mind at the point in time based on what you see in front of you. You'd be shocked at how accurate that wild guess is.
Awesome. We have Alistair. He owns multiple luxury restaurants, and we know restaurant industry obviously has been hit pretty hard. And he asked, do you have any particular strategies for negotiating rent reduction in a way that maintains a long-term positive relationship with the landlord?
Yeah, okay. So, and if you don't get it here, I mean, we put up a couple of videos on a YouTube channel that lay this out step by step. And it's kind of 3 steps here. Because your landlord is panicked. Your landlord is freaked out. I'm assuming that you're a good tenant and that you've been paying your rent and that you didn't destroy the place. So your landlord's first falling right on the heels of whether or not he can get his rent and whether or not he can make his payments is he's worried about whether or not you're going to survive and continue to be a tenant when this is all over. That's a secondary thought. How do you start this conversation? You start this conversation out with this person, and we're going to use adult language here because this is the time for adult language. This is a shit show. You're worried about whether or not I'm going to stiff you forever You're worried about whether or not I'm going to go into bankruptcy. You're worried about whether or not you're going to be able to get blood out of a turnip. You're worried about what's going to happen when this is all over, and you don't know when this is all going to be over, and you have no idea how you're going to pay your bills, whether or not they're going to let up on your tax payments. Articulate everything that your landlord is worried about, because this is going to be the cloud, the fog, the ink in his brain that's going to stop his brain from functioning. When you want to get into the second part of this, is how do you guys survive together? Start throwing that stuff out and then go dead silent, because you got to get a read on how much of the negativity that's clouding their brain, how afraid they are, before you can move forward. Now, they're going to give you some sort of a response. If they're giving you dead silence to this approach means you're on the right track, but you haven't cleared their head out sufficiently. There's more stuff getting in their way before they can hear you. And if you run out of things to say at this point in time, your last move is, and I probably haven't even touched on half the things you're worried about, because you don't know what else is clouding their fears, their thinking. They might have somebody in their family who actually has the coronavirus. They might have the coronavirus. I mean, God knows how many things they're worried about, which is all going to get in the way of their thinking. You got to get this out of the way. And the most effective way to deactivate negative thoughts is calling them out. It's not a guaranteed chance of success. It's just your best chance of success. Now, what sort of a sign are you looking for that it's okay to proceed? They're going to say something like, yeah, man, what do you got? They'll give you the green light to go ahead. It may not be an enthusiastic green light, but that you've got to wait till you've been given some sort of a green light. Now, your follow-up to this is what we teach in the Black Swan group as a thought-shaping question. It's based on the word how. It's asked deferentially. You're going to ask them how because people love to be asked how. It doesn't make them feel cornered or trapped. It gives you the opportunity to plant some thoughts in their head without them making their guard come up. And the how question here is, how do we work our way through this so that we don't destroy each other and we put ourselves in a position to thrive together after this is over? Because the two thoughts that you want to put in their head is, number one, I ain't going to do them any good to destroy you, because you guys can get locked into a death struggle, mutually assured destruction, where both of you are put out in much worse condition by the battle. They are not anxious about suing anybody over rent, particularly in a climate when afterwards no court is going to look favorably on a landlord coming after somebody over rent when the economy got shut down. Nobody wants to file a suit based on that predisposition of a court or a jury from a landlord's point of view. So how do we not destroy each other in this process? They don't want to be destroyed either. The second part of that question is, how do we thrive together when this is all over? Anybody that's been alive past their mid-20s has come to learn the phrase, this too shall pass. And that there is going to be an aftermath here, and that everybody's going to want to pick up the pieces with the people that they like doing business with before this meteor hit everybody. Your how question is also designed to drop that into their head. Now that you put those two things in their head, this gives you the best chance of success of them throwing something out on the table that the two of you can live with. And if they throw something out on the table that you can't live with, the automatic response to that, again, to continue collaboration, to demonstrate that you want to collaborate, but to let out know a little at a time, to make them think that based on the circumstances that you can't do that, is another how question. How am I supposed to do that? You throw that at them. Now, they might come back at you with, well, if you want to stay, you have to. That's actually where you want to be, because at that point in time, they told you they feel there's no give. What are the chances that there's absolutely no give in their position based on the current circumstances? Actually, zero. What's somebody going to do to you right now to throw you out of that building. Let's say the courts were open, which they're not. Nobody's putting you out on the street right now, and they know it. And it's in their best interest to collaborate with you if it's at all possible. They're calling you really to test you to get it, if they call you, to get a feel for whether or not you're going to survive this. And if you are going to survive this and you've been a good tenant, they're going to want to continue to do business with you. How's that for now?
That's awesome. I love the Jeff Spencer was very similar. The how can we create a win for me, a win for you, and a win for the system as a whole ongoing. It's just such a unique perspective that you step back and you can find those win-win-wins. All right. You mentioned like an individual propensity to either fight, flight, or make friends.
Right.
Do you think it's a genetic thing or more of a cultural and social thing? More nature or more nurture?
I would argue that that one is nature. We get a lot of questions about culture. The three types that we're talking about is derived from some thinking that I was exposed to when I was at Harvard's program on negotiation. There's something out there called the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument, which based on that will put you in one of 5 types. Now, my Harvard brothers and sisters threw 2 out of those 3 types out, the collaborative and the cooperative types, which are blends of those 3. And Bob Manukin, the head of the program up there, I believed him, but I said, why do you throw those other 2 types out? He said, because I believe that those are learned behavior. And between the Harvard people and the people that we've taught globally, and I think it's an underestimate to guess that we've given the TKI or version of it to 10,000 people. So that's a low estimate between the people that we taught in the classes. Everybody I taught at McDonough School of Business at Georgetown and at the School of Business at USC, we gave this test to, plus everybody we've ever trained, including Chinese business executives. And the data sample, what's the importance of the data sample from a business school? It's an international sample. It's Asians, it's Arabs, it's Western Europeans, it's Latins, it's Africans. It's a way to sample the world. And our data sample is regardless of the culture they come from, they split up into 3 types too, pretty evenly into the thirds. Especially when we were teaching for a while, we were teaching Chinese executives from the Chinese Development Bank. And we saw it split up into thirds with the Chinese. And if there's a stereotype about anybody, there's stereotypes about the Chinese. And we saw every data sample that we looked that it held true, that the types split up pretty evenly into thirds, regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of religion.
Awesome. Can you drop the name of that test again? We had a question about the...
Yeah, Thomas Kilmann Conflict Mode Instrument, TKI. And you can buy it online for like $15. It breaks it up into 5 types. They're very close to, or 3 of the 5 are very close. We renamed and refined it some. We actually have a version that we have come up with that we think is more accurate based on our data. So we took what they did and we just sort of rewrote the whole thing. We rewrote the questions and we rewrote the types based on our application and our own data. And we've got that on our website.
Cool. The website is Black Swan?
BlackSwanLTD.com, BlackSwanLTD.com. We've also got a free newsletter that we put out, which, if I may, the newsletter is complimentary. It comes out every Tuesday morning. It's short, sweet, and actionable. And the best way to sign up for that newsletter, we have a text to sign up function. If you text to the number 33777, and that's 33777, and send a message, Black Swan Method. It's not case sensitive, and there are spaces between those words. Black Swan Method to 33777. You get a response back asking for your email. It signs you up for the newsletter.
Excellent. I'll make sure that that's also in the notes for anybody that catches this replay. What do you think the lowest hanging fruit on the negotiation or the renegotiation front is, or sequence even, in an event like this? Where do you start? Where do you look to renegotiate first?
Well, I kind of want to know, is this information gathering thing from the other side? I mean, I kind of want to know what the other side wants to do first. There's a pretty good chance there's something they want to do that is massively good for me. Now, whatever percentage that chance is, I am unwilling to forego that. Because if they want to do it and it's massively good for me, they're going to feel like it's a win. It's going to increase the chances that they did it. It's also going to increase their speed of execution. And speed of execution is critically important in this time frame. So I want something they're going to do fast. And if it was their idea and if it was good for them, they're going to do it fast. They're going to execute very quickly. So I'm going to want to probe them out a little bit as to what looks good for them. And I'm going to say stuff like, it seems to me like you guys would have been thinking through some options based on the current circumstances. It seems to me you've got some ideas of how to improve this. They're going to go with what they want if I give them that kind of an opening. So I'm gonna look for the low-hanging fruit that they're going to execute most quickly. It's going to be my most immediate relief.
Perfect. I noticed that in a lot of the conversations, the examples, you say things like "I feel like" or "It seems to me." Is that's just part of your talk track, and I think it's great. Would you want to speak to that a little bit? It's a little bit in your book too, the way that you frame those things.
Yeah, it hits their brain in a completely different way. It's what we refer to as a label. It's sort of labeling a dynamic, being willing to take a wild guess. Now, I could say to you, what are you thinking about? And you're going to give me some kind of an answer. That's not a bad question because it starts with the word what, and what tends to be deferential. But even despite that, your guard is going to be going up to some degree. If I instead say to you, it seems like you thought through some options, it hits your brain a completely different way. You're going to give me a much quicker, much more unguarded response. I mean, our theory is that this bypasses the prefrontal cortex, the traffic cop of the brain. It hits people more kind of on the side, and it triggers a stream of consciousness. We know it triggers a stream of consciousness faster. What causes it? I really don't care what causes it to work. I just care what works. I don't care what works. I just care, or why it works. I just care what works. I'm a very mercenary in this regard. And so it seems like you've thought through some options. I know from our experience, you're going to come up with a lot more unguarded, a lot more quickly. You're going to feel much more ownership. You're going to give me much better information than if I ask a question. So, I mean, that's why phrasing that way it works.
Awesome. So that's labeling. Another great thing for people that asked how to practice. I think that's another thing you can start working on is
Yeah.
Perfect. This is a good question here because I think it makes people really uncomfortable when you're dealing with a sophisticated negotiator or perhaps somebody that thinks they're sophisticated, who are clearly using tactics. You can tell they're being tactical when they're negotiating with you. Do you call them out on it? Do you ignore them? Do you try to flip it on them? How do you handle people that you know they're using specific tactics when negotiating with you?
Well, to me, it's more of an issue as to why they're using those tactics. So if they're using tactics on me so that they can genuinely understand and find the best deal possible, I'm good with that. Everybody in my company, we use this stuff on each other all the time. If somebody starts out with something like, sounds to me like you're afraid to give me a discount. My answer to that is, yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. I'm not giving you a discount. If they're trying to cheat me, for me, I'm cutting off the conversation. There isn't anybody I have to negotiate with. And, if we were all to take a realistic look at our situation, when I got up this morning and I went to my sink, I found something bizarre and crazy. Running water. I thought about how many people are waking up today in this world that don't even have running water in their dwelling. Like how many people in Africa They get one bucket of water and they got to walk 2 miles to go get it. And then they got to come back to their house and they're not going to get any more water. I mean, in point of fact, if I'm in the US, I am living, all my problems are luxury problems. I got running water. There's probably more people on the planet who don't have running water than do. So do I have to negotiate with anybody? I don't know that I do. Put some stuff in perspective. I don't know if there's anybody you have to negotiate with.
Awesome. I imagine your office dynamics are interesting because you're a bunch of professional negotiators. What are the best, last one here, over the phone? So maybe you don't have opportunity to, see that they're slouching or get their body language, and you're in a negotiation over the phone. What are the best tips to develop this empathy and get what you want?
Yeah, well, the hardest part is going to be when they're silent because they've taken away their tone of voice for you to read, and you're not sure exactly in the context of the moment what their silence means. My son is a great example of that. I mean, we negotiate with each other all the time. We're talking on the phone all the time, and he is a ridiculously contemplative guy, and he also uses silence as a negotiation tactic. So when he's going dead silent on me, I can't see his face. I don't know what he's thinking or not. I'll say, look, I can't see you right now. I don't know what's going through your mind. And he'll tell me. So I'll just call out the dynamic, and then based on the moment, I can dial in pretty quickly as to he's giving me data improves design. He's giving me feedback. I can tell whether he's going silent because he's mad or because he's thinking or because he wants me to talk. If I pick up on the vibe of the moment, I can dial into it pretty quickly. So just be willing to listen when you're on the phone. And if you're unsure, saying like, hey, I can't see you right now, so I can't tell what's going on in your head. And there's a pretty good chance that they'll go ahead and tell you.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to curiosity, right? Just hey, what's going on? Awesome. Dan, do you have anything else? Oh, one more question. What about text and email?
Yeah, text and email. You're too long. Let's break them down. Let's talk about email.
Yep.
There's a person out there that likes reading a long email, and 99 out of 100 of you write them, which is crazy. Like, you see a long email, your eyes glaze over, and it's after 10 o'clock in the morning, you just delete it. You don't even read it. And then you will turn around at 4 o'clock and write a long email that you would never read. You would rather have your fingernails pulled out before you would read. If somebody put a gun to your head and said, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I either blow your brains out or you read this long email, you'd actually think about your brains out because you hate long emails. So on emails, here's what I'd offer to you. Look at emails as the same way you would look at playing chess. Are you going to lay out your next 7 moves to play chess in the same email? No, you're not. You're going to make one per email. Look at your emails that way. Look to make one move. Remember, the last impression is the lasting impression. Whatever you write last in that email is going to ring in their ears. Pretty good chance that whatever you write last is going to be at best mediocre. And whatever you wrote first was wonderful and flowery. So copy and paste what you wrote first and either delete it from the beginning of the email or at least duplicate it at the end, and you will give yourself your best chance of success on emails.
Awesome. Similar text message?
Text message, yeah, go slow. We like no-oriented questions in text messages a lot. They stand alone really well. Do you disagree? Are you against? Tone in both text and email is going to come off as cold and distant. So if you add anything into it, add something that softens the blow. I use I'm sorry and I'm afraid as softeners liberally in my emails and in my texts. And before the blow, not after it. Like if I got bad news, I'm going to say, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I got bad news. I won't say, I got bad news, I'm sorry. Sequencing is critical. Your I'm sorry and I'm afraid should go in front and not behind.
Do you typically end your text messages with a question mark Or do you try to phrase things as a question?
I'll put punctuation. I'll put in some kind of punctuation. I'll put an exclamation point because it generates positivity. I'll put in a question. A lot of times I'll put in 3 periods or some combination thereof. 3 periods and an exclamation, 3 periods and a question. You know, I tend to almost always put some sort of punctuation to enhance the message in a positive way at the end of a text, which also is going to be short.
Got it. I only ask because our text conversation is probably the most punctuated of people I talk to. So I didn't a method or a reason. Dan, you have anything else to wrap up with?
Yeah, well, I can imagine that you probably get the same questions on repeat. And so I'm wondering if we were to kind of rewind to the start of this whole discussion, what did we not ask you that we should have, or what would you really, really like to talk about that you don't usually get a chance to share because you're getting a lot of the negotiation questions?
No, this was thorough. This was really thorough. You guys hit on the stuff that people are dealing with right now. So I can't think of anything that we left out that I wanted to talk about.
Cool.
Awesome. Can you share with again, these are pre-vetted people. So the way we do this, they're all clients. They're all most business owners. I imagine everybody on here is a business owner and has been for a while. Best way to, I know you said YouTube, newsletter. How else can we just get further into your world and learn more about this, or contact your the Black Swan group? Fastest, easiest ways to do that.
Yeah, well, fastest, easiest way. You know, if you want us, if you got enough at stake, you know, it's only if you got enough at stake, and you want our help in some way, much more directly, other than the newsletter. And you want to get me on a calendar, you want to get somebody on my team from the calendar, Chelsea, Chelsey, at blackswanltd.com runs our calendar. If you would reach out for me directly, I would have to forward your information to Chelsea, and she would have to schedule it, which means contacting me directly is a way to delay things. Chelsea gets stuff on my calendar. She lives my life. She is my babysitter. So Chelsea's the best way to go. You got an inquiry, you want coaching. We coach one-on-one. We coach one-on teams. We're doing a lot of that these days. Like I said, we had a client that had $1.5 million at stake the other day, and losing that $1.5 million could have taken down in a short term. You know, we're bailing people out of the fire, and they're coming out in great position on the other end.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's crazy, and you got people with a lot at stake. So thank you for taking the time, jamming with us. And we will, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll send you this recording just so you have it, use it however you want to use it. And I'll reach out and harass you about some stuff.
Yeah, this was great. Great content. Love to put it up on our YouTube channel. That'd be fantastic.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our pleasure. Thanks so much. We'll let you go, but hope to chat again.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, guys. I enjoyed the conversation.